History often remembers empires for their vast armies and unstoppable marches. But sometimes, the fate of nations turns on a single moment when a few refuse to bow to the impossible. In the dust-blown wilderness of the Holy Land, on a day when defeat seemed inevitable, a sickly young king and barely 500 knights rode out against an army that could have swallowed them whole. What happened next defied every law of war and became one of the most astonishing victories the medieval world ever witnessed. In the year 1177, barely 500 Christian knights braced themselves against Saladin's vast host of 26,000. No chronicler expected them to survive. Yet what unfolded that day would etch itself into history as a miracle forged in steel and sand. The desert carried a dry, fateful wind across the Holy Land. Under the harsh sun, the banners of Jerusalem, golden crosses on fading cloth, fluttered not with pride, but with grim determination. The kingdom of Jerusalem teetered on collapse. Its ruler, Baldwin IV, known to his people as the Leper King, was only 16. His body was pale, frail, and ravaged by disease, but behind that fragile shell beat the heart of a warrior who refused to bow. Far to the south, a storm approached. Sultan Salah ad-Din, Saladin, the unifier of the Islamic world, marched with a force that seemed to shake the earth. Mamluk cavalry, Sudanese infantry, Turkish archers, an army of 26,000 under emerald banners. Their purpose was unmistakable: crush Jerusalem forever. Word of the invasion swept through the city like fire through dry brush. Fear whispered through the halls. "We cannot meet him in the field," one lord argued. "He outnumbers us 50 to 1. Another muttered that the gates should be closed and mercy begged for. But Baldwin, trembling and thin, pushed himself upright. His voice, weak yet unwavering, cut through the chamber. "If God wills it, then I ride. I will meet Saladin on the field. Jerusalem does not yield while I still draw breath." Madness, they thought, and yet something in his courage burned away their hesitation. The Templars rallied. The Hospitallers followed. From lonely castles and dusty villages came scarcely 500 knights and a few thousand infantry, the last line between Saladin and the Holy City. They rode out from Ascalon into a desert shimmering like molten gold. At the front rode Baldwin, his afflicted face hidden behind a silver mask, his thin fingers trembling on the reins. Beside him, the Templar Grand Master Odo de Saint Emon murmured, "Sire, this may be our last ride." Baldwin's blue eyes, fierce as a winter sky, met his. "Then let us ride as men already immortal." Ahead waited Montgisard and destiny. Meanwhile, across the plains of Egypt, Saladin's banners billowed like a green ocean. 26,000 soldiers marched northward, armor flashing beneath the sun, war drums echoing across the dunes. Saladin led them atop a black Arabian stallion, his composure regal, his officers brimming with confidence. One young emir gazed north and laughed. "The Franks will scatter before our blades leave their sheaths." Saladin's smile was faint. "Perhaps," he answered, "but even a wounded lion fights when trapped. We will scorch their kingdom so it never rises again." Fortresses fell before him without resistance. Gaza, Ramla, towns that once held out now collapsed like sand piles before tide. Victory seemed inevitable. Jerusalem lay almost undefended. In his haste, Saladin left behind siege engines, supplies, even parts of his baggage train. The Sultan believed the end already decided. But the desert punishes overconfidence. Scouts reported Baldwin had withdrawn toward Jerusalem. Saladin turned his army toward the Holy City, his men singing of triumph. Yet as they marched through the barren lands near Montgisard, the wind grew strangely still. The rhythm of war drums faded. Something in the air whispered of danger. On a distant ridge, sunlight flickered on metal. A Mamluk guard frowned. "What is that?" Before he finished, horns thundered. From the ridges above, a roar of hooves shook the earth. 500 armored knights burst forth like an avalanche from the heavens. At their head rode Baldwin IV, his silver mask blazing in the sun, the golden cross snapping behind him. The impossible had come for Saladin. The desert erupted in chaos. Sand exploded, horses shrieked, steel flashed like lightning as the Christian knights charged with terrifying speed toward an army 50 times their number. Baldwin's grip tightened on the reins, his frail body electrified by a fury that defied his illness. Behind him thundered the Templars and Hospitallers, cloaks stained with dust. Deus vult, God wills it. Their voices crashed like a storm across Saladin's front lines. The Muslim vanguard froze in disbelief. Panic rippled through the ranks. Some swore they saw specters descending from the hills. Others believed the Franks had been multiplied by divine wrath. Saladin wheeled his horse and shouted, "Close the ranks! Hold your ground!" But his commands drowned beneath the hurricane of steel. The first collision hit like the sky splitting open. Lances shattered. Men were crushed beneath charging horses. The front line buckled, folded, and broke. In seconds, order dissolved. Baldwin carved forward like a figure torn from legend. Weakness abandoned him. He fought not as a dying king, but as a force of nature. Around him, his knights tore through the enemy with relentless fury. Grandmaster Odo roared, "Strike deep, break their heart." And they did. Saladin's cavalry circled, trying to smother the charge, but the knights pivoted and struck again, tight as a fist, merciless as fire. Dust rose in choking waves. Screams of men and animals twisted through the desert. Saladin's guards crowded around him. "My lord, we must fall back," one cried. But the Sultan's eyes burned. "I will not flee before a handful of dying Franks." Yet even he saw the truth. His stretched-out army was collapsing under a blow no strategist could have predicted. Montgisard had become a storm of iron. The battlefield unraveled. Formation shattered. Arrows loosed wildly, hitting their own ranks. Camels panicked and trampled fleeing soldiers. Trumpets blared meaningless orders. Banners vanished in swirling dust. At the heart of the chaos roared Baldwin. His silver mask streaked with blood, his horse drenched in sweat. He seemed something more than human, a myth riding through the carnage. Wherever he turned, his knights followed, slicing through enemies 10 times their number. Odo bellowed orders. "Close in! Hit their flanks! Do not let them breathe!" The Templars obeyed without hesitation, smashing into the sides of Saladin's forces again and again. Saladin's brother, Aladil, shouted until his voice failed, "Stand your ground. The Sultan commands it." But the tide had already turned. The momentum belonged to the few. What had begun as Saladin's confident march to inevitable triumph had now descended into a waking nightmare, a storm of dust, terror, and disbelief. Baldwin's tiny force pushed ever deeper into the chaos. Their armor bent and cracked, their blades slippery with blood. Every knight fought encircled, drowning in enemies, yet not one of them broke. Retreat did not exist in their minds. Each man fought as if this hour were the last they would ever live. Somewhere amid the swirling sand and screams, Saladin's golden standard wavered. The sight ignited the Crusaders like a spark to dry tinder. With a hoarse roar, they surged forward. Saladin's guard closed tightly around him as arrows whispered past their heads. Aladil seized his brother's reins. "My lord, you must live. There will be battles yet to come." Saladin's eyes blazed with fury and humiliation. "By God, I will return," he snarled, before turning his stallion and racing southward. The moment their commander's retreat was seen, the last fragments of discipline shattered. The massive host of Islam broke like a dam bursting. Thousands fled across the dunes, chased by the relentless knights of Jerusalem, whose exhaustion was swallowed by a fierce, unstoppable fury. By the time the sun bled into the horizon, The sands of Montgisard were carpeted with the bodies of 20,000 men. The survivors, Saladin among them, rode through the night without daring to look back, haunted by the specter of their own fear. Baldwin, trembling and streaked with blood, slid from the saddle beside his collapsing horse. Kneeling, he whispered through cracked lips, "Not by my hand, Lord, but by yours." The desert wind carried his words away, half prayer, half confession, as the echo of history shifting filled the silent night. When darkness settled fully, the battlefield lay quiet except for the groans of the wounded and the restless stamping of exhausted horses. The moon rose over a plain of ruin, broken spears, torn banners, and uncounted dead. In the morning the sand had shone gold. Now it was blackened with blood. Baldwin IV climbed down from his horse slowly, his legs quivering from pain and fatigue. He had fought for hours while the disease gnawed mercilessly at his strength. Yet he still stood. The knights who gathered around him, what few of them remained, looked more like ghosts than men. Of the 500 who had charged that morning, scarcely half survived, their armor battered and their faces ashen. But they had done the impossible. They had smashed Saladin's army. 26,000 men slain, scattered, or fleeing into the desert's embrace. Giovanni of Ibelin approached, voice shaking with awe. "Sire, we have won. Against all reason, we have won." Baldwin gazed toward the distant horizon, where faint fires still flickered, the remnants of Saladin's retreat. He tried to answer, but emotion closed his throat. At last he whispered, "It was not our strength. It was the hand of God." He lifted his silver mask. The men saw the ravaged face beneath, the marks of leprosy, the pallor of illness, but in his eyes glowed something luminous, almost serene. A peace none had seen in him before. Odo de Saint Emon knelt, planting his sword into the blood-soaked sand. "Jerusalem lives because you did not yield. You are more than a king, my lord. You are God's weapon." Baldwin shook his head weakly. "No, brother, only his servant." Across the dunes, faint cries drifted, wounded soldiers of Saladin wandering the desert, lost, thirsting, dying. The once invincible sultan had barely escaped with his life, his pride in shards. Torches flared through the crusader camp. Priests moved among the wounded, whispering blessings, while surviving knights prayed in silence, too spent to unbuckle their armor. When dawn arrived, its pale light revealed something seen in almost no battle, a miracle made real. A dying boy king had faced an empire and triumphed. For a fleeting moment, the kingdom of Jerusalem shone not as a relic, but as a blazing beacon against the desert's endless sands. Morning crept across Montgisard like a ghost. Wisps of smoke rose from shattered wagons and burnt tents. The air hung heavy with the iron scent of blood. Crows circled overhead, their harsh cries slicing through the awful quiet that follows slaughter. Baldwin stood atop a low hill overlooking the plain. Before him, his men had planted captured banners, green standards of Islam thrust into the earth beside the crosses of Jerusalem. The sight was so solemn, so strange, that even the victors bowed their heads. Giovanni of Ibelin approached again, armor dented, face streaked with soot. "Sire, Saladin has vanished into the south. His forces are scattered. Some throw down their weapons and beg us for water." Baldwin's eyes remained fixed on the dunes. "Let them live," he said softly. "Enough blood has stained this desert." The knights exchanged troubled glances. Mercy rarely survived holy war, yet none dared question him. Messengers soon arrived. "My lord, Saladin's baggage train is ours. Gold, silks, armor, an entire army's wealth abandoned." But Baldwin barely heard. The victory had drained the very breath from him. His sickness, worsened by the battle, shook his frail body. Yet his eyes remained bright, unbroken, calm with a strange inner strength. Odo de Saint-Amand dismounted and knelt beside him. God himself has made you his champion, sire. None will doubt it now." Baldwin managed a faint smile. "A champion? No, my friend. Merely a witness." He struck them down. "I simply stood to see it." That night, the Crusaders camped beside a trickling stream. The wounded groaned, priests sang mournful hymns, and the evening air carried the scent of myrrh and smoke. In the stillness, some swore a pale glow rose on the horizon. Not fire, but something gentle, almost holy. Far to the south, Saladin rode in silence, his surviving guards around him. His head hung low. At last one of his emirs dared to ask, "My lord, how could this be? 500 against 26,000. Saladin did not answer for a long while. Then quietly he said, "The hand of their God is heavy, but the desert forgets nothing. One day I will return, and the Lion of Jerusalem will rise no more." The desert winds carried his vow into the vast night. The road home wound through olive groves glowing gold under the fading sun. Along it rode the battered but unbroken warriors of Montgisard, the few who had survived the day when the world turned upside down. Word of their impossible victory raced across the land faster than any rider. Villagers spilled from their doorways to witness the battered heroes pass, cheering, weeping, scattering flowers beneath the hooves of their weary horses. For years, the people of the Holy City had lived beneath a shadow, the dread of Saladin's armies, the certainty that their kingdom would be swept away. But now, for the first time in memory, they lifted their faces to the sun. The unthinkable had come to pass. The Leper King had returned as the defender of Christendom. As Baldwin neared the gates of Jerusalem, every bell in the city began to ring. Their echoes rolled across the stone walls like a rising tide. Monks and nuns flooded the streets, holding candles and icons high. Barefoot children darted through the crowd shouting, "Long live Baldwin! Long live the king!" The young monarch rode slowly, almost embarrassed by the outpouring of love. His silver mask caught the torchlight, turning his face into a gleaming vision. His armor was battered, his cloak torn and dusty, yet to the people he looked like a figure carved from legend. A king chosen, if not by strength, then by heaven. At the gate of the Holy Sepulchre, the Patriarch of Jerusalem awaited him with his priests. The old man knelt as Baldwin dismounted, tears shining in his eyes. "My son," he said softly, "the Lord has saved his city through your hands." Baldwin bowed his head, his voice thin but unwavering. "Not through my hands, Father. Through his mercy. Let's give thanks." Inside the sacred church, the knights laid their swords before the altar. Steel rang against stone like thunder, a vow renewed. The choir's chant rose like smoke, mingling with the quiet sobs of soldiers who had witnessed too much death, too much grace to speak. Odo de Saint Emond watched from a doorway as Baldwin knelt before the relic of the true cross. "He should have died out there," he whispered to Giovanni of Ibelin. Giovanni nodded slowly. "Perhaps he did, and what returned to us is something greater." Outside, the bells rang on. The people sang, and for one bright, impossible moment, the kingdom of Jerusalem felt eternal, shining beneath the stars. That night, Baldwin sat alone by a window overlooking the city he had saved. His body shuddered with pain, yet a faint smile touched his lips. "So long as I breathe," he whispered into the darkness, "no man shall take you." The words drifted into the night, a promise to his God, his people, and the fragile kingdom he loved. Winter arrived early that year. Cold winds swept down from the Judean hills and through the towers of Jerusalem. And the king, once blazing like fire, now grew weaker by the day. Baldwin IV's leprosy advanced mercilessly. His fingers stiffened, his skin cracked and bled, and his strength guttered like a candle fighting the wind. Yet the memory of Montgisard burned in every heart. Pilgrims journeyed from across Christendom to lay eyes on the young monarch who had stood against Saladin. Chroniclers hailed him as a new David, a boy king who had struck down a giant. But within the palace walls, the hero lay sleepless, haunted not by triumph, but by its cost. One evening, Giovanni of Ibelin found Baldwin at prayer before crucifix. His battered mail, still bearing the scars of Montgisard, stood beside him. "My lord, your body needs rest," Giovanni said gently. Baldwin smiled faintly. His silver mask lay unused on the table. "My body has never obeyed me," he murmured, "but my heart still hears its duty." He lifted his gaze to the crucifix. "Christ carried his cross to the end. I must carry mine." Giovanni bowed his head. "You bore more than any man." Baldwin turned toward him, his eyes clear despite the fever burning behind them. "Montgisard was not our triumph. It was a warning. God lent us his strength for a moment to show what faith can do, but he will not raise our swords forever. When Saladin comes again, he may test our hearts instead." Outside, the bells of the sepulchre told the hour. The city slept, unaware that its greatest king was already slipping into legend. From the southern deserts came whispers brought by merchants. Saladin was rebuilding, gathering tribes, forging alliances. His pride was wounded, but his resolve remained unbroken. The crescent moon would rise again. Baldwin felt it too. He sensed it in the tremble of the cold wind, in the shadows of his dreams. Gazing toward the distant hills, he whispered, "Let him come, and when he does, may he find men still willing to die as we did." The candle flickered. The boy who had humbled an empire bowed his head in prayer. Outside, Jerusalem slept beneath a thin, fragile peace. Years crept by, and the desert healed, but men remembered Montgisard. To the south, in Cairo, Saladin rebuilt his strength. He trained new legions, forged new alliances, and swore that the humiliation of Montgisard would one day be answered. Yet in his heart burned not only anger, but respect, deep, reluctant respect for the boy who had defied him. When his generals mocked the Franks as weak and dying, Saladin silenced them. "You speak of disease," he said coldly, "but that boy shamed me before God and men. Pray you face death with such courage." He would not march against Jerusalem again until every piece was ready. In the north, Baldwin IV ruled from his throne, broken in body, unbroken in spirit. He could no longer ride, nor lift a sword, yet from his throne he governed with fierce clarity. The nobles who once doubted him now obeyed in humbled silence. Giovanni of Ibelin and Odo de Saint-Amand carried out his will, strengthening fortresses and securing the borders. But Baldwin knew the truth. Peace was a line drawn in sand before an incoming tide. One night, a half-dead scout staggered into the palace courtyard. "The Sultan moves again," he gasped. "He gathers the tribes." The banners of Damascus and Cairo marched together. Silence gripped the court. Baldwin dismissed all but his closest companions. "He will come," the king said softly, "but he will not find us sleeping." He turned toward a tapestry depicting Montgisard, knights charging through a storm of dust, a silver-masked figure at their head. His hand trembled as he touched it. "Once," he whispered, "God gave me the strength of 10,000 men. I will not ask for that again, only for the courage to face what must come." Far across the dunes, beneath a crescent moon, Saladin's banners rustled in the night wind. Two kings, one broken, one unbowed, watched the same stars and prepared for their final reckoning. The year was 1185. Jerusalem stood in uneasy peace. Its borders bristled with fortresses, and its throne sat beneath a heavy silence. Baldwin IV, the Leper King, was dying. In the royal palace, sunlight filtered through stained glass onto his bed. The bright eyes of the boy who had once charged into legend were dim. His hands, once steady on the reins of war, were now little more than fragile bone. Giovanni of Ibelin sat beside him. The priests had given the sacraments. The end was near, but Baldwin felt no fear. He stared toward the window, toward the Mount of Olives glowing gold in the setting sun. "Giovanni," he whispered, Do you hear it? Hear what, my lord? The wind. The same wind that blew across Montgisard. A faint smile touched his lips. It still carries the sound of hooves. Giovanni bowed his head. Sire, all of Christendom remembers. Baldwin's breath grew slow. Tell them this, he murmured. It was not our swords that won the day, but our faith. I was no hero, only a witness. Tell them to believe, even when they are few, even when they're dying. For God is strongest in the weak. Outside, the bells of the Holy Sepulchre began to toll. Their mournful tones mingled with a whispering desert wind. The Lord is my strength, Baldwin breathed, and my shield. When the bells fell silent, the boy king who had defied an empire was gone. The city mourned him for 40 days. From beggars to nobles, they lined the streets as his coffin passed, not as a leper, not merely as a king, but as the Lion of Jerusalem. Far away in Damascus, when word reached him, Saladin stood in silence. His court waited for triumphant words. Instead, the Sultan bowed his head. May God have mercy on him, he said quietly. He was a king. So it was that two great enemies were bound by the same desert wind, one by death, the other by memory. Years later, when Saladin finally took Jerusalem, the chroniclers wrote that no blood was spilled. Mercy ruled the city that day. Some whispered that the spirit of the Leper King still walked its walls, watching over conqueror and conquered alike. For courage does not die with kingdoms.